A talented young woman returns home after a performance. The door shows no signs of forced entry. No screams for help pierce the night. But the next morning, her mother discovers her daughter strangled to death in her own bed. The killer was someone the family trusted most. If you want to follow this haunting story to its conclusion and understand how investigators uncovered the truth, subscribe to our channel for the complete investigation and more chilling true crime cases. Welcome to the story of Jessie Blodgett, a case that shattered the peaceful community of Hartland, Wisconsin, and exposed the terrifying reality that danger can come from the most unexpected places. Hartland, Wisconsin, in the summer of 2013, was the kind of place where neighbors knew each other by name, and families rarely locked their doors. It was a quintessential American small town, the kind where parents felt safe letting their children walk home after dark, and where violent crime seemed like something that only happened in distant cities. The community of roughly 8,000 residents took pride in its safety, its close-knit bonds, and its wholesome Midwestern values. This sense of security would be forever shattered on the morning of July 15, 2013, when one family's worst nightmare became a reality. Jessie Blodgett was 19 years old in the summer of 2013, a sophomore at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, studying music education. Those who knew her described her as genuinely kind, with an authentic warmth that drew people in naturally. She spent her time teaching music lessons to children in the community, where her patience and gentle demeanor made her a beloved instructor. Parents regularly praised her ability to inspire confidence in even the most reluctant learners. Beyond her studies, Jessie was deeply involved in local theater, performing with community groups and throwing herself into every role with dedication and enthusiasm. Theater was more than a hobby for her. It was a passion that allowed her to express herself creatively and connect with others. Those who shared the stage with her remembered not just her talent, but her professionalism and willingness to help. In a community as small as Hartland, Jessie had become a familiar and cherished presence. Jessie lived with her parents in a comfortable middle-class home. Her mother, Joy Blodgett, worked hard to provide for the family and took immense pride in her daughter's accomplishments and character. The Blodgett household was warm and welcoming, a place where friends always felt comfortable. Like many families in Hartland, the Blodgetts felt safe in their community. They had never experienced trouble, never had reason to fear for their safety, and certainly never imagined that tragedy would strike so close to home. Their trust in their neighbors was absolute, a trust that would soon be revealed as tragically misplaced. The evening of July 14, 2013, seemed like any other summer night for Jessie. She had just finished performing in the musical Fiddler on the Roof with her community theater group, a production that had been months in the making and had finally culminated in a successful run. The closing night performance went smoothly, and the cast and crew were in high spirits, celebrating their hard work and the positive reception from audiences. After the curtain fell for the final time, the group gathered for a cast party, a casual celebration to mark the end of the show. It was the kind of wholesome event that characterized life in Hartland, with friends laughing, reminiscing about mishaps during rehearsals, and savoring the satisfaction of a job well done. Jessie enjoyed the party, chatting with her fellow performers and soaking in the bittersweet feeling that comes with closing night when you're simultaneously proud of what you've accomplished and sad that it's over. Around 1 o'clock in the morning, she decided it was time to head home. She said her goodbyes, made her way to her car, and drove the short distance back to her family's house. The streets of Hartland were quiet at that hour, peaceful and familiar. Jessie arrived home safely, let herself in, and headed to her bedroom to get some sleep. There were no signs of trouble, no indications that anything was amiss. She had no reason to believe that this night would be any different from countless others. She didn't call anyone in distress, didn't report feeling followed or unsafe. Everything appeared normal. What Jessie couldn't have known was that danger was already present, either waiting inside her home or about to arrive. The complete absence of forced entry at the scene would later become one of the most chilling details of the case, suggesting that whoever killed Jessie either had access to the house or was someone she willingly allowed inside. In a community where people rarely locked their doors, this detail would take on added significance. Jessie went to bed that night expecting to wake up the next morning, perhaps sleep in a bit after the late night, and ease back into her normal routine. Instead, that night would be her last. The morning of July 15, 2013 began like any other for Joy Blodgett. She had been at work, but returned home expecting to find Jessie still asleep, recovering from the late night of celebrating with her theatre friends. It wasn't unusual for Jessie to sleep in after a performance, and Joy had no reason to be concerned. She went about her routine, perhaps thinking she'd let Jessie rest a bit longer before waking her. When Joy finally went to her daughter's bedroom to rouse her, she expected to find Jessie curled up under the covers, groggy and reluctant to face the day. Instead, Joy walked into a scene that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Jessie lay in her bed, appearing at first glance to be asleep. But something was immediately and terribly wrong. Her skin had taken on a pale, lifeless quality. As Joy drew closer, the horrifying truth became undeniable. Her daughter was dead. The panic and anguish that followed can scarcely be imagined. Joy's screams brought neighbors running, and within minutes, emergency services were called. The peaceful Sunday morning in Hartland erupted into chaos as police cars and ambulances converged on the Blodgett home. When investigators arrived and began their initial assessment, they were struck by several disturbing details. There were no signs of forced entry anywhere in the house. No windows had been broken, no doors had been jimmied or kicked in. Nothing appeared to have been stolen. The house wasn't ransacked or turned upside down as one might expect in a burglary gone wrong. This suggested that whoever killed Jessie either had a key, had been let in voluntarily, or had never left after entering earlier. The lack of any struggle outside her bedroom indicated that the attack had been contained to that single space. Jessie had been murdered in what should have been the safest place in the world, her own bed in her own home. The medical examination that followed revealed details that were both heartbreaking and crucial to the investigation. Jessie had been strangled using a ligature, a method that requires sustained effort and close contact with the victim. This wasn't a case of a momentary loss of control or a single violent act. Strangulation, particularly ligature strangulation, is an intimate and deliberate form of violence. The autopsy also revealed that Jessie had been sexually assaulted before her death, adding another layer of horror to an already devastating crime. The forensic evidence would prove crucial in the days to come, but in those first hours, investigators were facing a puzzle with no obvious solution. As news of Jessie's death spread through Hartland, the community was gripped by fear and disbelief. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Parents who had always felt comfortable letting their children roam freely now kept them close. Neighbors who had never bothered with locks suddenly found themselves checking and double-checking their doors and windows. The police were inundated with calls from concerned residents, some reporting suspicious activity, others simply seeking reassurance. The question on everyone's mind was simple, but terrifying. Who could have done this, and were they still out there? In the immediate aftermath of Jessie's death, friends and community members rallied around the Blodgett family, offering support in whatever ways they could. Among those who came to comfort the grieving family was Daniel Bartelt, a young man who had known Jessie for years. Bartelt presented himself as a friend, devastated by the loss someone who shared in the family's grief, and wanted to help in any way possible. He appeared genuinely distraught, expressing his sorrow and disbelief that something so terrible could happen to someone as kind and beloved as Jessie. His presence seemed natural, even thoughtful. After all, in small communities like Hartland, it was expected that friends would gather to support each other in times of tragedy. Daniel Bartelt was 20 years old at the time of Jessie's murder. He had attended the same schools as Jessie, moved in similar social circles, and was considered part of the broader group of young people in the Hartland area. Some reports indicated that he and Jessie had dated briefly or had maintained a close friendship over the years. Regardless of the exact nature of their relationship, Bartelt was someone the Blodgett family knew, and importantly, someone they trusted. When he showed up at their door offering condolences, they had no reason to turn him away. He sat with them, cried with them, and listened as they struggled to make sense of the senseless. But even as Bartelt played the part of the grieving friend, investigators were beginning to notice inconsistencies. During conversations with police, Bartelt made comments that raised red flags. At one point, he mentioned specific details about the crime scene, or the manner of Jessie's death details that had not been released to the public. Only someone with inside knowledge of the investigation, or someone who had been present at the scene, would know these particulars. When questioned about how he came by this information, Bartelt's explanations were vague or unconvincing. The investigative team trained to spot these kinds of slips began to take a much closer look at the young man who had seemed so eager to help. As detectives dug deeper into Bartelt's background and his movements on the night of July the 14th and the early morning of July 15th, more troubling information emerged. Just days before Jessie's murder, another woman in the area had been attacked by a man wielding a knife. She had survived the assault and had provided a description of her attacker to police. When investigators compared this description to Daniel Bartelt, similarities emerged that couldn't be ignored. Could the same person be responsible for both attacks? The timeline and circumstances suggested it was possible, even likely. The breakthrough in the case came from forensic evidence. DNA samples collected from Jessie's body and from the ligature used to strangle her were analyzed and compared against potential suspects. When Bartelt's DNA was tested, it matched the samples from the crime scene. The evidence was damning and irrefutable. The young man who had sat with the Blodgett family who had offered them comfort in their darkest hour was the same person who had taken Jessie's life. The realization sent shockwaves through the investigation team, and once the news became public through the entire community. On July 31st, 2013, just 16 days after Jessie's body was discovered, Daniel Bartelt was arrested and charged with her murder. The speed with which investigators were able to identify, gather evidence against and apprehend the suspect was a testament to their dedication and skill. But it did little to ease the pain and betrayal felt by those who had known both Jessie and her killer. How could someone they had trusted, someone who had seemed so normal, commit such a horrific act? The question haunted everyone who had encountered Bartelt, especially the Blodgett family who had allowed him into their home, even as they mourned their daughter. As more details emerged during the investigation and subsequent legal proceedings, a disturbing picture of Bartelt began to form. The attack on the other woman, which occurred just days before Jessie's murder, suggested a pattern of escalating violence. Investigators worked to understand whether there had been warning signs, behaviors that might have predicted such a violent turn. What they found was a young man who on the surface seemed unremarkable, even ordinary. He didn't fit the stereotype of a violent criminal. He had friends, held a job, and seemed to function normally in society. Yet beneath that surface lurked something dark and dangerous, something that had led him to commit unspeakable acts. One of the most perplexing aspects of the case was the apparent lack of a clear motive. Bartelt and Jessie had no known ongoing conflict or dispute. There was no evidence of a romantic relationship gone sour or of any recent argument between them. Financial gain didn't appear to be a factor, as nothing was stolen from the Blodgett home. The sexual assault suggested a possible motive, but even that didn't fully explain why Bartelt had chosen to kill someone he had known for years, someone who by all accounts had always been kind to him. The randomness and senselessness of the violence made it all the more terrifying. If there was no clear reason, no obvious trigger, How could anyone protect themselves from such an attack? The trial of Daniel Bartelt began in 2014, less than a year after Jessie's death. The prosecution presented a mountain of evidence against him, including the DNA matches testimony about his suspicious behavior in the days following the murder, and evidence linking him to the other assault. The defense had little to work with. The physical evidence was overwhelming, and Bartelt's own actions had betrayed him. Despite the clear case against him, Bartelt maintained his innocence throughout the trial. He refused to admit guilt, refused to provide any explanation for why Jessie's DNA would be on his person or why his DNA would be at the crime scene. His lack of remorse and continued denials were particularly painful for Jessie's family, who attended the trial hoping for some measure of closure or understanding. In the end, the jury didn't need long to reach a verdict. Daniel Bartelt was found guilty of first-degree intentional homicide, among other charges. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again have the opportunity to harm another person. As the sentence was read, the courtroom was filled with a mixture of relief and sorrow. Justice had been served in the legal sense, but no verdict, no sentence could bring Jessie back. Her family faced the grim reality of moving forward without her, of navigating birthdays and holidays and ordinary days with a permanent Jessie-shaped hole in their lives. In the aftermath of the trial, Joy Blodgett and her family transformed their grief into action by founding the Love Greater Than Hate project. This initiative educates people about violence in relationships and teaches them to recognize warning signs before tragedy strikes. Through speaking engagements at schools and community centers, they share Jessie's story and deliver a crucial message: the most dangerous person is often someone you know and trust. The project emphasizes 3 vital lessons. First, violence typically comes not from strangers, but from acquaintances, friends, or intimate partners. Second, warning signs exist and must be taken seriously. People should trust their instincts and report concerning behavior rather than dismiss it. Third, community awareness saves lives. When people look out for one another and speak up, instead of staying silent, tragedies can be prevented. Jessie's case shattered Hartland's sense of security and forced the community to confront an uncomfortable truth. Violence doesn't only happen in big cities or to strangers. It can happen anywhere to anyone, and the perpetrator often seems harmless or friendly. This realization prompted important conversations about balancing trust with vigilance in close-knit communities. Today, Jessie Blodgett is remembered not just as a victim, but as a talented, kind young woman whose legacy lives on through her family's work. Every person they educate represents a victory of love over hate. While nothing can undo the tragedy, Jessie's story continues to resonate across the country, serving as both a cautionary tale and an inspiration to choose compassion and action in the face of violence. Daniel Bartelt's conviction brought legal closure and ensured he would never harm others again, but it couldn't answer all questions or heal all wounds. For Jessie's family, the fight continues in classrooms and community centers, working to prevent other families from experiencing the same devastating loss. In choosing to respond with education rather than hatred, they've ensured that Jessie's light continues to shine. This case underscores a fundamental truth about justice and community safety. Vigilance and trust must coexist, and when we fail to recognize danger, even from those we know, the consequences can be irreversible. True safety requires not just secure locks and well-lit streets, but a collective commitment to recognizing warning signs, supporting survivors, and holding perpetrators accountable regardless of their familiarity to us. What do you think about this case? Were there warning signs that the community missed? Could Jessie's death have been prevented if people had recognized concerning behaviors earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments below based on the facts of the case. And if you want to stay informed about this story and other compelling true crime cases, subscribe to our channel for in-depth coverage of mysterious and haunting cases that remind us why justice and awareness matter.